Happy Easter, guys. I just wanted to make a quick Easter video about Jesus. So get in here. This is Jack with Cosmic Root. I'll talk about UFOs and the paranormal. Please hit like and subscribe and let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Yeah, I have come to the realization, or at least the conclusion, for my own self personally, that Jesus is and was real. Now, I am not a Christian. I was not raised a Christian. I was an atheist all of my life until the last few years when I began experiencing what I can only describe as metaphysical or spiritual stuff. Now, that peaked during the year and a half that I was in taking Reiki classes, and I had some really cool experiences during that time and leading up to that. Since then, it's kind of slowed down, but one of my really coolest experiences involved Jesus, and I'm going to talk about that and a couple of other pieces of evidence that I've found that seem to indicate Jesus was real and that he was more than a man. Now, he may not be the Jesus that many envision, or he may absolutely be that Jesus. So, take it with a grain of salt and use your own discernment. And I respect everybody's beliefs, but in my own particular experience, it began with an ayahuasca ceremony. And so what happened was I had been reading some Dolores Cannon books on Jesus, two of them, where people were recalling past lives under hypnosis where they knew Jesus. And the vision that emerges in these books is a kind of a trippy vision of Jesus, very new agey, tied up with Atlantis. UFOs come into it a little bit. And he's not depicted necessarily or at all as the savior as he would be depicted in the religion founded on him, according to this information. But he was depicted as the prophesied great teacher of Atlantis. Now, why was I reading these books as an atheist? Well, I had been having these experiences, and I was trying to understand spirituality and all this stuff, and I had, come across many near-death experiences where people had been interacting with Jesus. Of course, even non-Christians, Muslims would interact with Jesus, and they would convert afterwards. So, I found that really interesting. So I wanted to know what the truth of that was. And who Jesus was without reading the dogma, as real as that may be. So I found these Dolores Cannon books, and I really was grokking on them, and I was meditating on this vision of Jesus during an ayahuasca ceremony when I had this event where it seemed like I was resonating with Jesus. I could feel him somewhere out there on the other end of this. It was very powerful. And I thought that maybe he would just pop out and say hello. It happens sometimes to people in ayahuasca on their own journeys. They may see something. And I didn't see anything, but it was this powerful feeling that I was making a connection with him. I don't even know if he was aware of me, but I could feel him. And so I said, to my guides or Mother Aya, whoever was there, well, if I'm not just tripping my balls off, because I totally was, please send me a sign when I'm sober. So a month later, as I'm perfectly sober, driving down the road, I see a UFO that makes the shape of the cross in the sky. It was a bright white light that appeared right here and went down and disappeared. And then a moment later appeared and disappeared, making a perfect, Christian cross. And, I was blown away by that. I was like, wow, that was definitely not a shooting star or a satellite. That was a freaking UFO that just made the sign of the cross in the sky. I had almost kind of forgotten, what had happened a month earlier and that I had requested some sign that had been real. But, after a couple of moments, I realized, oh, wait, that was the sign. I asked for a sign, and that was the sign. But I still couldn't quite believe what I saw. So when I got home, I went out in the backyard and I looked up at the night sky and I said, please send me a confirmation that event actually happened. And a single white light up in the heavens appeared and went very bright and very slowly irised off and vanished. And that was my confirmation. And that was pretty amazing. Of course, I was greedy. I said, Okay, well, if that was real, send me another one. And they said, screw you, Jack. You got your confirmation of the confirmation, and that's all you're getting because the cross in the sky, that was the confirmation of that resonance that I felt in that ayahuasca journey. So anyway, but so an amazing experience where I don't know what happened then. I don't know what it all means, but I do feel like there is some reality to Jesus. And that I was interacting with that, or experiencing that, or feeling that on the other end of my journey. Now I was making some sort of consciousness connection. Okay, so that's one piece of evidence that I have as an individual that Jesus is real, as somebody that is a non-Christian, and that had always imagined that if Jesus was real, then he was just a human, some sort of crazy cult leader, right? And I was no longer feeling this way. This was confirmation that these near-death experiencers were encountering somebody. Now they sometimes interpret him differently or saw him differently, and sometimes they saw him in a very strictly Christian sense, and sometimes they didn't. So I think that's interesting that people do seem to experience different versions of him. But even again, some people that weren't believers in him were seeing him. So there does seem to be some sort of concrete there beyond what we're expecting or thinking about or resonating with in my case. Okay, so that's one piece of evidence. So another piece of evidence is the Shroud of Turin, and I want to go through two pieces of evidence here. Both of the other two are about the Shroud of Turin. And one is just purely on the science of the Shroud of Turin. And I made a video a few weeks ago talking about the science that has been done on the Shroud and seeming to confirm the legitimacy of the Shroud, not just as an historical artifact likely from that period, although the dating on that particular artifact can be tricky. Then if you watch the video by Funny Old World that I clipped from, you'll see why. But the science involved in investigating the Shroud is very impressive. Very forensics, because a lot of it is about the blood. And what does the blood mean? And they found a lot of stuff out from studying the blood on the Shroud. Now, a lot of it totally confirms what's in the Bible and what's in popular belief about Jesus, and some of it's actually a little different. Like the crown of thorns that was on his head, as revealed by the blood, was more of a hat apparently. And Funny Old World goes into an explanation about this, saying that actually crown is kind of a mistranslation in the Bible, or in the our version of it, the English version of it, that the correct word is actually something more like priest hat, the hat the priests wore. And the crown of thorns seems to have been more of a mockery of a priest hat. And so it wasn't just the circle that we typically imagine, but it was more of a hat. Again, a mockery of a priest hat. And so, so some of the things they were finding from studying the Shroud was a little different from what we might imagine. But it all corroborated that someone died of horrible wounds and torture and crucifixion. And if you watch Funny Old World's video on it, or I imagine many others that go into the science behind studying the Shroud of Turin and what they found, what these researchers found, it's really incredible. Now, a lot of it is very grisly because it is, very forensic and talking about the blood and what happened to the body and the person during his experiences. But one of the most amazing parts of the research done on the Shroud is the image that was burned into the Shroud, like only a micro layer thin into the Shroud. Nobody can explain how that image was done, burned into the Shroud. Nobody knows how you could do that now. Nobody knows how you could have forged that hundreds or thousands of years ago. Very anomalous, that image that is depicted or that is seen in the Shroud of Turin. And so that's I'll let you go and watch Funny Old World's video or my video on that, or others talking about specifically the research and the science. But to me, that was very compelling and very amazing. And again, seemed to be corroboration that not only did a man die in that shroud, or there was a body that was crucified that was then put in that shroud, but that something very anomalous happened. Something burned into that shroud, an image of that man, and nobody can explain how. So, okay, so that's piece number two. Piece number one was my own personal experience. Piece number two is the science behind the shroud. And piece number three is this amazing remote viewing. And I'm sure there are others. But Daz Smith and his amazing team of remote viewers, actually, I think it was his team that did the viewing, and Daz was the tasker of this event. I want to get it right. I don't think this viewing has become public yet, so this will be a teaser for that viewing when it becomes public. But all of the viewers were seeing Jesus. They weren't necessarily knowledgeable that it was Jesus, but they were seeing a man. They were all pretty much seeing a very powerful, very spiritual man, and they were seeing this amazing amount of energy coming off of the man. Now, the remote viewing was specifically on the Shroud of Turin. And so this energy event is very possibly how that image was burned into the shroud, this spiritual, esoteric image burned into the shroud that wrapped Jesus's body. And it was seen, I believe, by every single one of those remote viewers, this energy event. So they were all seeing this highly developed spiritual man. One of them said delusions of godhood or something like that, not knowing, of course, that we're talking about Jesus here. Yeah, so a fascinating series of remote viewings on the Shroud of Turin, all seeming to confirm the legitimacy of the shroud and also of what caused the image on the shroud as being genuinely anomalous and spiritual in nature, with this vast amount of energy coming off of the being, off of the man who was in that shroud. And more than one, two or three of them said that this energy and this event that they were witnessing was world changing in some way. They didn't know how, but they sensed that it was an historic moment that would change the world. And indeed it did. If we're talking about the resurrection of Jesus and his final discorporation from the physical into the etheric, or into, his translation into the spiritual, right? And one of them, or at least one of them, maybe two of them, were actually seeing a city in heaven. They didn't call it heaven, but they said, yeah, there's a golden city at the end of his journey, seemingly. So, yeah, again, I will link to that if that viewing becomes public, and if it's not, I will link to it when it does become public. But yeah, an amazing remote viewing from Daz Smith's team. Thank you, Daz, for hooking me up with that remote viewing. I really appreciated it, and I wanted to include the evidences from that in this roundup of three pieces of evidence that I've come across just off of the top of my head that seem to corroborate that, yeah, Jesus was real, and he wasn't just a guy, and that when he died, something powerful and inexplicable and scientifically corroborative seems to be, or confirmable, seems to have happened. So happy Easter, guys. I hope you have a good one. Again, this isn't coming from a Christian perspective. I still am not a Christian exactly. I've also had a Kundalini experience, and I've experienced the reality of different faith systems. So I don't know if there's, one particular faith system that is the one. But from my own interpretation and vision of Jesus, he would be totally cool and was cool with all of that. He was into energy. He did hands-on healing. He had all sorts of experiences. According to the Dolores Cannon books on Jesus, he would have been into all of that, and he was into all of that. And not only into it, but he was the master of it. So, yeah, when he did hands-on healing, light came out of his hands, according to that information. So, anyway, happy Easter, guys. I hope you have a great one. And again, I don't mean to offend anybody if you are a devout Christian. I totally respect that. But let me know what you think about it all in the comments below. Like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time. This is Jack with Cosmic Road, signing out.